Good evening. I'm called to order the regular meeting of the Carrabelle City Commission. It's Thursday, December 6th, 2018 at 6 p.m. We're at the Carrabelle City Municipal Complex. And I want to ask Commissioner Allen to please say the prayer, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and if you would all stand.
Our God and Father in heaven, we're so grateful that we have you as our leader and our provider of all good things, good gifts. We know that this is a season of good gifts, and we know that only good gifts can come from you. Ask you to be with us tonight as we deliberate on the things that pertain to this wonderful city you've given us, that we might act harmoniously and in good faith, and that our decisions will be in harmony with your will and the will of our people. We pray also, Father, for our country. And in time of distress, we ask you to bless our country, that we might stay on the path that we began. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move right on into the consent agenda for the November 1st, 2018 special meeting minutes and the November 1st, 2018 regular commission meeting minutes and the attorney's invoices. Did everyone have a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
And the invoices?
Make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Millender, second by Commissioner Mathis. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. All right, then we have public comment, and I know we've got one person at least that wants to make public comment, so we'll go ahead and get that underway. Mr. Don. And just tell us your name and speak into the microphone. It may not be turned on.
Hello. Is it on now?
It wasn't.
Did I just turn on?
Switch up.
My name is Gathana Parmelis, and I'm here before you because I think very few members of the public and perhaps members of this commission are unaware that the Air Force is proposing a major radar installation at the mouth of Carrabelle River. The document is up for public comment for less than another 2 weeks. No public meeting on this has been scheduled, and this is a very small portion of the document, the environmental assessment, which the Air Force has released. And it is a little difficult, in fact a whole lot difficult from this document, to understand how massive this installation proposal is. If you read it carefully, they are talking about building a 60-foot-high berm involving hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of fill. That berm, which of course is the equivalent of a six-story building, would then be topped by a radar, not an antenna, but a radar structure with a giant dish on top. The distance to the center of the dish appears to be another 70 feet. This is one of 4 installations proposed for the eastern Gulf Coast, from here down to the Keys. The installation is for weapons under development now, for testing purposes, but what they want, besides building a structure, which would be quite the visual object in a town at such low levels, they want to be able to test it up to 100 times a year between Monday and Friday. This would involve stopping river traffic, I believe, from this, because they're going to have spotters and so on. The proposal also involves cutting down trees on the spoils island at the mouth of the river. So there's these considerations visually. I believe the mayor has worked out, or someone else has worked out, the impact on the roads of the construction. As far as I can tell, there would be absolutely no permanent jobs created by this. It would be an eyesore visible from East Point along all of Highway 98 coming into Carrabelle. It certainly would be visible from almost all points in Carrabelle. It would set a precedent for an incredibly high structure. It doesn't enhance anybody's property values along that area. And I'm very concerned also that there seems to be no real evidence of what impact turning these dishes on would have on bird life, except that they list in their impact pretty much every known bird. And all they will say is they know it will overheat the birds, kind of like cook them, like microwave, and then it will disorient them. But it doesn't know what the real effects are. For them to go ahead with this proposal without any meaningful public input, and for them to have their public comment period while we're recovering from a hurricane and everybody is preparing for the holidays, seems to me truly unfair. It doesn't give us enough information or enough time to figure out what's going on. And I would just like the commission to be aware of it, and perhaps together, people in this area can put some pressure on them to have this process slowed down enough so that we really know what is being proposed. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And Ms. Gathana, have you written in your comments yet to them? Have you submitted your comments?
No, I haven't. I may do it at the last minute, because the more I read the entire document, the more I realize they've omitted certain things. They're going to build 4 of these identical installations, but in Carrabelle, they don't discuss the 60-foot berm. They just say there's an existing 15-foot berm. I think that's kind of sliding it a little bit. I think they're being disingenuous.
Well, I think you should possibly, if it concerns you that the comment period is not at the correct time, at the appropriate time, and that they need to slow down their progress, you should go ahead and give them that comment. I'm sure you can go back and submit as many comments as you want.
That's an excellent idea. I certainly will do that immediately.
Okay.
Is this,
Sorry. Go ahead.
is this proposal coming out of Eglin, Tim?
Yes, out of Eglin. There's a man named Mike Spates, S-P-A-I-T-S. He's the one that the comments need to be addressed to. And it's on the Eglin Air Force website under documents, and it's called GREEA. So it's the Grand Environmental Assessment for this proposed project.
Is this one of the spoil islands right out in front of our place?
Yes, it is.
Uh-huh.
All those trees that we've watched over many years finally grow and solidify those islands would be cut because they don't want anything over 40 foot. So considering how fast those trees grow, I would expect they would simply cut down any fast growing species.
Buffety,
Is that a document available to us?
Yes, it's
What you
available
got there?
online. I haven't printed out the whole thing, just portions of it. And again, there's elements of it that are only mentioned on other sites and not on the Carrabelle site. So you have to basically dig through all 4 of these proposed sites to get an idea of what's really going on. And there's absolutely, although you wouldn't think, one would think that if you were engineering something like this, you would have measurements and specifications that you could publish, but these are incomplete.
Okay, well, we thank you very much, and as I showed you, I'm going to be reporting on that as well in my mayor's report. And I have a different set of comments than you had. So you've given us a background on the structure, and I'll give a different background as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, Mr. Oxendine, please come forth and state your name.
My name's Sean Oxendine. We got a business down at 201 West 11th Street. And for the last year and a half, I've had a water problem, and I've brought it to numerous people's attention. My wife has brought it to numerous people's attention. William came down and saw it flooding my building, my outside shop was getting flooded. It never was like this before. I had took pieces of styrofoam all the way to Avenue C where the mayor is, put them on the road, and they end up in the front of the hair salon down there. Now we got this new road that's being redone, and I'm not an engineer. I don't claim to be an engineer. There's no stormwater drains past 10th Street going down the hill. We did have a big rain last weekend, but during that rain, everything down there in my whole property was white with all the new dirt out of that road. And like I said, I'm not an engineer, but anywhere that I've ever seen a road being built, the road was found and the water was able to get off the sides of the road. We had created a ditch. They've got a curb that's this high above the road base now, and I know that they're not fixing to go in there and put 12 inches of asphalt. I don't think that. Like I said, there's no stormwater drain. The county has been over there. They brought a big scooper machine over 2 months before the hurricane. They made 2 little passes and made the berm up against the road where the water can't get off the road now. Then they said, we gotta stop, we gotta call no cuts. Well, you know, you should call no cuts before you get started, not after you start digging. So anyway, the no cuts came within 2 days and the county hadn't been back. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that it's not acceptable for all of that water to continue to come down there on me. There's a retaining pond right at the corner of Highway 98, a retention pond with a culvert pipe in it that goes, I guess, to the river.
Mr. Oxendine, we just had a meeting about that this evening with the engineer and Ms. Courtney and the attorney. And I took several pictures during that downpour and actually a pretty good video, and we sat there and watched it. And we're trying to put together something now where we're actually going to report on that under the engineer's report. We're going to talk about it. We, Ms. Courtney and Ms. Keisha and myself attended a mitigation meeting this morning, and we're going to try to get that on a plan where we can get some grant money to manage that stormwater. And we're going to talk about it under the engineer's report shortly if you'll stay for that. Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
All right, and it was very revealing to see all of that lime rock.
Right, right.
Okay.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, you're welcome. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sean.
Okay then, is there any other public comment? Okay, Ms. Lisa.
I just wanted to remind...
Who are you?
I am Lisa Munson with the Carrabelle Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to invite everybody to Carrabelle's 24th Annual Holiday in the Harbor and Boat Parade with Lights this weekend. I just finished right before I came to this meeting, a whole schedule of events, and I have some on the front table there, if anybody cares to pick one up on their way out. But we're going to have a great time this weekend. Saturday at 1 o'clock, the festival is going to be on Marine Street and Avenue B, where we're going to have the road closures. And on the bottom of this, I have made the notice of the road closures. I've put it on Facebook and posted that several places. But the festival's 1 to 8 p.m. There's free admission. We're going to have Pam Noble's Dance Studio. They'll be doing a dance performance at 5 o'clock. We've got some food. We've got over 24 vendors that will be showing up. And then, of course, a big highlight of the day is Santa and his elves will be arriving at 2 o'clock with the Carrabelle fire truck and visiting with children and photo ops. And once again, books are going to be provided by the Dinner Divas and Bring Your Book Franklin. And of course, the Carrabelle History Museum is putting on this portion of the event. And the Harkin Law Firm with his candy canes and Carrabelle Cares. And we really appreciate this great addition to the festival. We have a boat parade. I'm still working on the boats. You know, they always tend to enter last minute, and some of them were damaged or destroyed and won't be coming in this year, but we're working on it. Debbie Jordan will be doing music down at the Clerk at 5:30. The boat parade starts at 6:15, and we've impaneled a whole new group of judges this year. So we'll have a little bit of a fresh perspective on lights. And then also, there's going to be activities afterwards at different locations. Sunday, there's Crooked River Grill at St. James. It's going to have their usual Sunday brunch. And then you can finish up the weekend at 6 o'clock at the Christmas on the Coast. Churches are putting on a free program over at the Franklin County School. So hopefully this will get everybody feeling a little bit festive. It's given some of our vendors that we've recruited from the disaster area a chance to get away and have an enjoyable day and look at our beautiful town that the city of Carrabelle has done such an excellent job of getting all cleaned back up. And we appreciate it.
Thank you. Where did you get that t-shirt?
Oh, by the way, Amy's promos made these t-shirts for us.
Let us see.
And for the boat parade, and to help fund this project. So I have them available at the chamber for $20. And they're all long sleeves. I have children's sizes and adult sizes. So stop by the chamber and I'll figure out where else. But this is going to help finance the holiday on the harbor, because this year, as you know, everybody's focusing on repairs and damages and stuff, and so the sponsorships aren't as high, so we're just going to sell t-shirts. But it's all going to be great fun, and I hope everybody's able to attend. I think the weather's supposed to be 64 during that day, and the rain's not supposed to show up till way after it's over.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then, is there any other public comment? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Terry Sense. I'm with the Small Business Administration, and I just wanted to remind your community that we have a deadline for applications coming up this Monday, December 10th. Yes, there's the brochure lesson in the back. Once again, we write loans to homeowners, renters, nonprofit organizations, and businesses of all sizes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? All right, then we'll move right on into Commissioners' reports. Commissioner Allen?
I have nothing at this time.
All right, Commissioner Mathis?
I have nothing.
And Commissioner Walden?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Millender?
I shall pass.
All right, you all just always leave it up to me, and of course, I've got a page and a half, and
Yeah.
quite a bit is happening, but this is large font, so don't worry. Okay, so I just want to let you know that Carrabelle this past month has been awarded a Resilient Coastline Planning Grant by the DEP. Only 10 applicants were awarded out of 30, and Courtney and I have been working with Richard Fetchek to complete the application back in October, and then right now he and Courtney are working on developing the project budget. Then on November the 16th and 17th, I attended the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials, number 4, with 15 others from 15 other Florida cities, and the first day of instruction focused on the dynamics of decision-making, and then on Saturday, we worked on a new meeting concept called open space meeting processes. But I'm not going to get into any more of that because we've got a lot to talk about this evening. I'm going to talk about Ms. Cathana's topic now. Back in July of 2017, it was reported in the Apalachicola Times that the Air Force announced a proposed project called the Gulf Range Enhancement for Remote Instrumentation Sites. And it was well publicized back then, and I thought I was going to receive public comment or concerns on it, but there was nothing. And the Air Force proposes to place instrumentation further to the east of Cape Sandblast so they can use more of the Eglin Range airspace. for training. And this would include, as Ms. Cathana said, 4 sites between, I thought I read Cape San Blas and Tampa, but it could be.
No, it goes down to Ann.
Okay. But one of the sites are going to be here in Carrabelle on Air Force property, or that they're proposing. This is a proposed project at the end of Marine Street. And the document that's online is an environmental assessment document, and it was released back in November. I don't know, I can't really tell when it was released. And where I see it for public comment, where you contact Mr. Spatz, I read the last day is December the 19th. And last week I was bombarded with numerous concerns and comments from several people here in Carrabelle regarding the site, just as you heard Ms. Cathana. So I compiled all of these comments, about 23 or 25, I had them numbered, and sent the list to this Mr. Spatz with Eglin Public Affairs, and with a request for the Air Force to conduct a town hall meeting or public hearing or community outreach meeting, something like that here in Carrabelle. And I've talked to Courtney about it. We can have it right here in this, but it's going to be a while before it happens, so it will be in our new building. Or if there's a lot of people, we'll find a bigger spot for it. But it's better suited, I feel like, for the Air Force representatives to come here with their engineers and planners to educate and inform and answer questions of the public and take the public comments regarding their proposed project, rather than this commission try to explain their project that we don't really know anything about. It's very technical. Have them come here with their conceptuals and plans so that we can all hear it at the same time, and we can all form our own opinions and conclusions on it. If anyone wants to see my correspondence and with all of the concerns that I sent, I'll be glad to make that available to anyone. I'll give it to the clerk. I did hear back with a very brief response from Mr. Spatz saying that they would take up the concerns with their specialist. He would get back with me regarding my request on having a public outreach meeting. So that's all I know about that at this time. And are there any other questions? I don't know anything else except what I've tried to read. It's a technical report. It's very long, 347 pages. And I'll be glad to provide a link to that as well, if anybody wants to see it. So right now, Courtney and I are working with Career Source to place about 4 laborers to assist the city with storm cleanup. The laborers will be funded through the National Dislocated Worker Grant for Hurricane Michael. The offer, though, comes with multiple requirements. The workers must be under supervision. They must work 40 hours a week, must keep their time schedules. They must have a single work site for 1 40-hour week at a time. They can't handle power tools or drive commercial vehicles, cannot handle money, cannot work with inmates. We must provide them with their tools, instruments, transportation to perform the assigned job. Written job description relating back to the hurricane must be provided. And Courtney and I talked about this. She said that would be easy to do, thankfully, because we've got job descriptions now, but we just have to relate it back to Hurricane Michael. And so we're just trying, right now we're trying to work on ways to address the requirements, how we can actually manage this, because we could use some help with storm cleanup. And then I believe Charlie's going to take, for his department, a couple, I believe we discussed that as well. And it would be easier for your folks to supervise, since streets and roads and people have inmates. Then this morning, as I mentioned to Mr. Oxendine, Courtney, and Keisha, and Mr. Sullivan and myself attended the local mitigation strategy meeting at the EOC, and I submitted 4 projects. Looks like one of them, the culvert on Gulf Avenue, will stand. We're going to put together a stormwater.
We already have, on the local mitigation strategy,
Carrabelle already has stormwater projects, but I talked to them about adding different projects on there, and she said to send it over to her. So we were talking about Ryan Drive and Southeast Fifth Street.
Plus Gulf Avenue and a couple of other locations.
Where's the culvert on Gulf Avenue?
Right there across from where Miss Sands' place is,
Existing.
that washed out so bad, the house is for sale there. Okay, so then the industrial building received some damage to the roof during the storm, and that's being assessed as well, and that would go under FEMA reimbursement as well. So then, over the past month, I've talked with Tim Banks. He's a loan manager with the DEP State Revolving Fund Loan Program, and he's reported that the DEP is offering financial assistance to cities in the wake of Hurricane Michael. And he says that he's very proud of Carrabelle's loan payment history, and he would really like to help us and provide us with some financial assistance, and we're going to discuss that further under Courtney's report, but we did discuss it at length at our Water and Sewer Department meeting. Then, as I told Mr. Oxendine earlier before this meeting, I met with Courtney and Dan and Russell to review two items, the progress on Sperry on their the parking lot issue, and then also we discussed about the stormwater issue over on Ryan Drive. So we've got a plan, and we're going to put that into work here for Sperry to see if we can get them to move along on their parking lot punch list. But as far as we can tell, the interior of the building, the punch has been completed. So, and then this is another one. This is one, I've got three now for y'all to consider. Rusty Paget has been in touch with me twice. Rusty Paget is the owner of Paget Construction, and he has a proposal that he would like to trade the old water plant property there on Southeast Avenue C. He would like to have that property, and he would like to trade that for roadway resurfacing projects. So how does the commission feel about that? All I can do is just bring that to you, and do you want to have it discussed further? Do you want to have it on the agenda? Do you want to have him come before you? Or, I know we certainly can't make a decision on yes.
Yeah, just so you all don't waste your time or get, too far down a given road, there is CC&A requirements in the statutes as far as work that's done and what we, our obligations to bid out, pay for it and all that. And knowing the cost of road resurfacing, I can't imagine it won't exceed our thresholds. Maybe over 25,000. Looking over Russell. Yeah. 25,000. So we can, if it is something that you all want to explore, then it could be an opportunity to kind of dig through it to make sure we don't put ourselves in trouble.
So this is something that you all need to decide.
So that's Carrabelle Park? Is that
Yes, so
right?
that's Tamara Park, and I did tell I advised him that it is, the property was named in the name of a basically full-time volunteer here in Carrabelle. You can see I'm getting choked up over it. So,
You don't think,
any
You don't
response? I need a response.
he doesn't want to build a botanical garden there, does he?
No, he wanted, well, he didn't say what he wanted to do with it.
Talk to him about that then.
Maybe I don't know enough about it at this point to make an intelligent comment,
I don't know, this is all I
but
know.
I don't know that proposal sounds exactly interesting, unless I knew more about it. Dan just brought up a good point about the cost effect, and just thinking about the property and the threshold of $25,000, that would definitely come into play, in my opinion, on the 25,000, the value of the property.
Well, we would have to have, we would have to put it out to bid, is that correct? Or something like that. It would certainly have to be advertised.
I don't want to sound, there's a lot of problems with that.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there is the idea that, hey, you know, I'm given, that's what I do for a living, people give me problems, and they say, make this work, figure this out. So I mean, if that's the direction I get from you, I'll do what I can. I may still reach a conclusion or recommendation or whatever that says, this, you need to avoid this, but, I mean, think of it from some of the things we've been working on as far as, you know, at what point does he get the property up front, does he get the property later, he does work. We've all done it in our, I would say not all, but in our personal lives, you've had that with someone, you say, hey, you rent my place, get a reduced rent, make improvements to the property, whatever scenarios, they're tough. They don't always work out, and then how do you enforce that? That would be very tricky if we got legally opposed to each other. He'd say, hey, I did everything I was supposed to do. We say, no, you didn't, the roads aren't quite the quality we want, we don't want to need you the property. I mean, I can imagine issues popping up.
Ms. Gatana?
Do you want me to?
Well, it would be good if you can. We prefer that.
I'm going to say from bitter experience, trading city land for a proposed construction for the city did not work out well with Dan Osley, and I doubt very much it would work out well ever again. All those problems that your attorney is discussing, we had in spades for years. So there are sources for money for repaving jobs, including gasoline tax. There's no sources for more city land. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we had to get the attorney in action to get the project finally constructed in 2013-14, the 12th Street Fishing Pier. That land was traded for that in 2008, I believe.
No, it was earlier than that.
Okay.
I mean, that is,
That's
Lord knows, we never want to go back in time.
Uh-huh.
But similar, I mean, there's certainly analogies to be made, but this one's even a little more dicey. There's a developer's agreement, there's a legal statutory process that one followed. This one, which
Well,
is
I would suggest that we kind of, we need to make a decision, and do we want to hear more, have Mr. Paget come, or if we're not interested, I would request that we have the attorney contact Mr. Paget, because I don't know why he called me in the first place. I think he should have really called Ms. Courtney, and just let the attorney, kind of explain, that if we're not interested.
Well, let me say what I'd be interested in. The rest of this board needs to speak as well. If someone was coming to the board with a proposal on a trade for city land to create a development that was going to enhance the city of Carrabelle's business district or something to that nature, I would probably be interested in listening to more. But just a trade of land, an open trade of land with nothing in behind it for road surfacing, just that man may want that piece of land for a future sale, turn it over. I don't know what he would get. So I'm just a basic trade, I wouldn't be in favor of it.
And he may want it for a laydown yard, and that's not.
Maybe store his asphalt there.
Yeah, it's almost that now.
Right, that needs to come out.
I know it. So, tell me what you all think.
I'm not in favor of trading no city property. Like Tony said, if he can bring in jobs, guarantee us, we know he ain't wanting us trade, resell it. I'm strictly against it.
I'm with you on that.
Okay, then. All right, can we have the attorney contact him? Would that be all right with you, Mr. Hartman?
that's fine. I'll just, I mean, I'm in contact and tell him that.
We're not interested at
No
this
way,
point.
no way.
Okay.
And it's Rusty Height.
Yes, I'll get you the information. Okay, now I have two more items. They're requests, and then we'll have to say yea or nay. For a very long time, the city has had a tradition of giving a $50 Christmas bonus to all the employees and a $25 bonus to the volunteer firemen every December. Last year, this commission gave a one-time, I believe it was a $500 bonus to the full-timers and half that amount to the part-timers. But now I've had some rumblings and some questions on whether or not the city's going to give the $50 bonus, or we're going to start that back up again. Will that continue? So I'm putting that question to the commission. Do we want to continue with the $50 bonus that?
I'm fine with that.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with the traditional $50 bonus that was described to the city employees for Christmas.
Okay.
Second that motion.
All right. We have a motion to proceed with the $50 bonus, Christmas bonus, by Commissioner Millender, and a second by Commissioner Mathis. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and that motion carries. Okay, so this one's along the same lines, a little bit more detailed. But I believe it would be a nice thank you and acknowledgement to all of our employees and our full-time volunteers to have a Christmas dinner for them, especially in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael, for all of those who have worked so hard. And since I've been on board with the staff here over 7 years, the staff has had one Christmas luncheon. So I'm going to put this question to the commission. Miranda has priced and our numbers did include the attorney and engineer. Miranda's priced a buffet at $15 each, and we're guesstimating there would be about 74 guests if they brought their one employee and volunteers, attorney and engineer with one guest. And that would be about $1,100 and then tax. So that's just a proposal I'm putting to you. I spoke to Courtney very briefly about it. We don't know if they would prefer a dinner or a luncheon, or if they would all go in the first place. So it's just
Where would it be?
Miranda priced it at the Crooked River Grill. We were just trying to get a place that could handle,
We used to do it
50
right
to
there.
70 employees. Yep, I have attended one Christmas dinner back there for a luncheon. And we could do that as well.
Oh, my God. Grill sounds better.
So, I just thought it would be a nice
And I'd be in
thing.
favor of it.
But,
I move to do it.
I beg your pardon?
I'll make a motion to do it.
Okay, we have a motion then by Commissioner Allen to have a Christmas dinner for the employees and the full-time volunteers and the engineer and attorney. And commissioners, that's included in that count as well. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Either way.
Yeah, go, take this.
Okay, so two of them were seconded, so we have a second by Commissioner Millender and Mathis. So that's a motion by Commissioner Allen, a second by Commissioner Millender. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then that motion carries. And that's all for me. Thank you for listening. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. We'll be back here for the January 3rd meeting. So,
We're done?
yes, I'm done.
No, I said we're done.
No, yes, bye-bye.
Kind of close that out.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on now to the city attorney's report.
All right, I just have a number of items to bring you up to speed on. one to get direction on. Just running through them, the cell tower lease, I have comments from the mayor, I have my comments. We've gone around maybe twice now on just with comments. I've also got some back from the cell tower folks. They've asked that I submit any additional comments we have, which we do have some, before December, I think it was 14th, which I'll do. And so if anybody has any additional comments, shoot them to me. The big focus has been to try to define and limit the footprint of this cell tower lease, as well as financial terms on it. There's a lot of issues, but because it was, I think, designed more for private than it was public. But we will, what I'll do is I'm going to feed them back any additional comments we have. That'll put the ball in their court, and in January we should have their response to those.
Dan?
Yes.
Has the current draft been narrowed down considerably?
It has been narrowed down, but it's still broad. It's still a big, I mean, they haven't necessarily agreed, you know, to exact things we're asking for. And yeah, so it's a little bit of a stilted process, partially my fault, but we're going back and forth. They have, you know, almost looks like multiple layers on their side, where they have a representative that showed up here, Ms. Bodie, and then she goes back to her, there's a layer behind her that she's communicating to get it done. Yeah, and so, I mean, I can speculate on what I think's going on, but that doesn't make it what's happening. I don't want to speculate.
I understand that, and I guess the point I was getting at was the last time we actually had a discussion about it here, there was some comments made by several of us, which I think you've included in what you've returned to these folks. But what I remember of looking at that lease, it was really cumbersome, very involved, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of language that was totally unnecessary. And it could turned into a more simplified lease. And I guess that was the basis of my question, if it had been narrowed down.
Right, and it has a bit, but it's clear that they are trying to tie up as much property for as long as possible and pay as little as possible. Which is understandable from their perspective, but since we're a public body, you know, we just talked about, you know, what we just talked about as far as trading land for work and this and that. A 99-year lease or a long-term lease, even a 50-year lease is, I mean, that's tying it up for all intents and purposes for, you know, for any alternative use.
Yeah, on
And
this,
we talked about, we felt like that was too long.
Yeah.
Too long.
on this map here that somebody else presented, that's their little, where the Coast Guard used to be. Is it there or out here on these spoil islands?
I do not know. You're talking about the Air Force installation?
Yeah, that's the Air Force station where their tower is.
If
Behind this little,
And what we're talking about is the cell tower at Land.
oh, okay.
yeah.
Where did we get?
We're fixing up towers. We got all kinds
We
of
got,
towers going
they
in.
want to put towers
We got
on.
people wanting to build towers everywhere.
Yeah, power and data.
Well, if they pay us enough, they can have it for 100 years.
They don't want to pay though.
That's it.
And
They want
that's,
for nothing.
really, Mr. Hartman expressed, I don't know, but this is what I feel like. They want, they just want to secure the land because they, all through the report, it talks about they can sell the lease or release, sublet, whatever. It's like they want to secure the property, and then in years to come, for a little bit of money. The money they're offering is too
And
small.
total control.
Yeah, and then years to come, they may not put anything for 20 years, and then years to come, they put something there. So we really don't even know what it would look like, what they would put there.
And that's the kind of thing that I'm referring to that I personally wouldn't be in favor of.
And again, just, this is, again, I don't want to, this is more about the procedurals, but they have this, because it's interesting to me from my old engineering days, but this 5G that's coming out, the new technology from 4G, what we use on our phones. the big pushes for this 5G, and it's gonna replace landline stuff, Comcast and everything. It's gonna be faster, quicker, everything. It's coming in the next year or two. So I would imagine you're gonna have a whole nother, whatever, gold rush to locate sites, to put in these types of facilities capable of, you're gonna have on your phone, it's gonna be faster than a fiber cable. So, and that's coming literally, big cities will get it in the next 18 months. So we'll get it in the next 5 years.
And that's okay.
It's great.
And far as I'm concerned, I'm willing to listen to a request for a reasonable lease, but not something that they're gonna pay pennies for and tie up the property for long, long periods of time.
And surrounding property, that's a major concern. What do they mean by surrounding property?
Everything we own.
So, we need to know these things, so.
That's how I feel. I don't know about the rest of
Another item of update is in the collection action at the airport. Dr. Granthams has hired an attorney. They filed a motion to set aside a default that was entered for a failure to respond timely to the complaint that we filed. I encourage the attorney, obviously they'll set that for hearing at some point. We do not have a hearing date. I encourage the attorney to make us an offer in that case, to try and stop the bleeding on both sides as far as litigation. I had not, and that was 2 weeks ago. When I say 2 weeks ago, it's all a blur, but right before Thanksgiving, I had that conversation with him. Have not heard anything from them since.
Excuse me, then will the judge set the hearing date?
The judge will. The judge will give us hearing dates, we'll set it. And then we'll oppose it. Their basis to get it set aside, just briefly, is they have to show due diligence, that they have meritorious defenses, and that they're excusable neglect. And really the excusable neglect is saying, hey, we missed the timeline, we missed the 20-day response period because they're blaming the hurricane, which I think is probably pretty, that's a tough one to argue against, but I told them we are not simply going to agree. We'll let the judge decide. But just so everybody's prepared, I would think we're about to now re-engage. I think the judge, it's a possibility the judge will set it aside, and then they'll respond, and the case will proceed forward.
What kind of time are we looking at possibly here?
I would expect the hearing to occur in the next 30 to 45 days. The hearing of whether or not to set it aside, and if the judge sets it aside, we give them 20 to 30 days to answer, then we file 10 days after that a reply. It would unfold into 2019.
That's what I'm asking about. If you don't get a response back for settlement or proposed settlement from the airport.
I'd be surprised if we don't get something back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because again, they're going to spend a significant amount of money just in this process they're doing. Right, just trying to get this set aside. They're behind the 8 ball right now. They've got to get caught up. There's a good chance they will get caught up.
Is holiday going to drag it out even further?
Yep. And the judge, I forget when the new judge gets seated, but we got changeover of judges and everything.
That's correct.
Another item is I did get a response and follow-up even today from Little Custom Homes. They had sent us back a marked up lease. We had sent them a lease. They sent back one, called a counter offer. The high points of it are they want a reduced monthly rental amount, and it goes like this. They want a 4-year lease. We offered 3. They came back at 4. They want the first year free as a ramp-up period. They want year 2 to pay $3,500. We had said $4,000. Year 3, they want to pay $4,000. We had asked for $4,500. Year 4, they say they will pay $4,500. The security deposit was reduced from $10,000 to $5,000 by them as their counteroffer. The term of the lease goes from 3 to 4 years. The early termination provision that we had included we had included a early termination provision that said prior to the end of the lease term that they're in, they can provide 120 days notice and vacate the premises. They added a provision to the effect that any time during the first year of the initial term that they could get out by providing 30 days notice, they could terminate the lease.
So, basically, then, what I see in there, they want the first year free, rent-free, and basically then, during that first year, they can terminate at any time with a 30-day notice. So they'd just be in there, and if they wanted to go, they'd just go. Thanks for working out.
They want the trial period.
And we did offer them a 3-month trial period, or a 3-month ramp-up period. And so then they've reduced the deposit then as well, from, we requested 10, they reduced that to 5,000. And then, as Dan explained again, they've reduced the rental that we've requested, the monthly rental.
Are there any mentions of jobs from them?
No, and we, just for refresher, is we kept this strictly on a money basis.
I understand.
Right, so no mention of jobs. They did not try to, there was talk during the negotiations of they were saying, oh, we'll bring these jobs and give us a nominal amount of monthly payments and everything. So that, they did not try to go back into that, but they are asking for the first year no rent.
Okay, let me remind
We
you.
had given them 90 days.
I want to remind you now, when we sat in there and talked to them 2 months ago, I believe it was, you and I, Mr. Hartman, you and I thought that he had already provided Ms. Courtney with the information to do a security check, a back credit check, and a tenant screening check. That's the way he talked in that room back there. Courtney still today has not received that information. We still do not have a credit check or a tenant screening check, and that's something that we all agreed that we would want to have with the lease proposal. So I don't know what to say about that part. But I will say that we have a tenant in there now who has completed those items and is paying rent that would just love to have that area for free for a year. So.
You're right. Or he, yeah, absolutely.
He would love to have that for free for a year. I mean, who wouldn't?
It's like having a trial marriage.
He said that's like having a trial marriage.
But I'll pay.
And walk out in 30 days? Okay, all right now.
3 months, they having months. I got what we do.
3 months.
The approach here would be, I think the way we had, a while back, was that the mayor, myself, Courtney, were to be negotiating. So I'm bringing this just so everybody's aware of what's going on. Certainly, the commissioners can share any thoughts, feelings, ideas they have with Courtney. And unless you all direct otherwise, we will go back again with a counteroffer of some sort.
That's what I was going to bring up, and Commissioner Walden brought it up already, kind of mentioned it, because I think we should go back to the committee and let them negotiate it. I, from my voice, sitting here on the board, don't want to do a whole lot of changing from what our original proposal is and follow their proposal. I'm in agreement that there's a lot of folks that like to have it for free for a year. And I think our offer was kind of reasonable. Now, if we need to make some reasonable concessions, I'd be willing to listen to those from my voice. But those offers, I'm not real excited with as my voice on the board.
Good. All right.
My opinion is we don't go back to negotiate until we have what we all agreed that we want, or that we wanted to have, was a tenant screening background and a credit check, a background credit
I
check.
think that's part of what I'm saying, and maybe Commissioner Walden's saying is.
His credit
That's
check
up
would
to
be
you
like
guys
mine.
as the negotiating committee to see that that's fulfilled.
And I, honestly, I don't believe that we need to go back and renegotiate the contract until they can.
I'll agree with you.
I agree with that. I agree.
Okay, is that it? Okay, all right,
Way I
that's,
feel.
you hear
All right,
that,
I'm
Mr.
gonna,
Hartman?
I do,
Okay.
I'll get back with them.
Just let Courtney. Let's direct Courtney to do that, all right? Can Miss Courtney just call them and say that we need this information, and then we'll,
Absolutely, yeah.
the committee will move forward then, once we have that information.
Perfect.
Okay.
And he filled out our form before, but he put all of his, FEIN numbers and not his social security number, so it wouldn't run a personal,
That's
it just ran it on business, which didn't give us much information.
Okay, and the contract that he gave us had Mr. Denton's name as the guarantor. Okay, what else do you have, Mr. Hart?
All right, sorry, I'll get through this quick, is you sent me an email, Mayor, on the Lanark Water and Sewer District
Yes.
question.
Mhm.
Actually, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
Is that you had mentioned in your email that you were going to follow up with the other Dan. The other Dan who had worked this
Oh,
out.
no, I did speak with Ms. Courtney, she knows, and a fellow that wrote this, a citizen that wrote it, to let me know exactly what 3 properties that they're referring to in that
Okay.
transfer agreement. But Courtney knows what 3 properties they were referring to there. But there's several items. One of them speaks of how the proceeds, if you sell surplus property, how the proceeds must be spent. And then it even addresses the Sykes property, or the property that Mr. Sykes may want. So, and then it also talks in there as a sidebar note, 3 pieces of property that were supposed to be deeded, the city were supposed to deed 3 pieces of property to the Lanark Village, 2 pieces to the Lanark Village Association, and 1 location to the fire department. And Courtney has done some research. The fire department has their deed, the Village Association has their deed on the boat storage lot area. And then there's 1 piece that we believe the deed has not been completed. And if that's correct, I would suggest and request that we go ahead and complete that deed, and that will
So
settle
it was
any
never
question.
recorded anyway, it's not in the official record.
Okay, so what I would ask, and no problem preparing the deed, I can do that in 20 minutes. But what I'm looking at as far as what was this resolution, this is a Lanark Village District, a special district resolution. It must have been, I know there's an agreement between the city and Lanark.
Mhm.
Okay, so we want to follow that, not necessarily their resolution, because we're not party to their resolution. We got to be, I think they'll match up, I think these are all done in.
I did take a little snapshot out of the agreement, and what I was really wanting you to point out is that it says here, the city agrees that if it, because I had discussed selling land in Lanark to make a down payment on a loan for a project to the west, but it says here, the city agrees that if it sells any land conveyed to the city by the district, meaning Lanark Water and Sewer, pursuant to the transfer agreement, the proceeds of the sale shall be used to address the needs of the water and wastewater systems serving the district. So, and that's what I was wanting you to interpret, the way I see it, any sales from surplus property in the district revenues from that sale would need to go to projects to enhance that Lanark district water and sewer system, which it needs a lot of help.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the plant, the main plant, physical plant, transmission distribution in Lanark.
Right.
But it can go back to even though the main plant isn't, it certainly serves that area, so
And so it does address the property that Mr. Sykes is also interested in. The parties agree that whether the lessee closes on the purchase of the 3 acres more or less, either before or after closing, the proceeds shall be used to pay the district's outstanding liabilities, including accounts payable or debt outstanding. And the city did pay, the water sewer department, according to this agreement, did pay right at $847,000 on outstanding loans and bills or whatever they had there at the time. So that just to give you all an idea, and it was a learning process for me on how revenues can be spent from sale of surplus property in landlords. And it even talks about the city agrees to provide a preference for hiring of district employees if positions are open in the city. And the city agrees that district employees shall be paid any compensation, whatever. But it's quite interesting, the whole document gives a good history.
And then last but not least, I've got myself a big kind of horns of a dilemma on this election issue of moving the elections, changing the terms, changing the election date that would in turn, as a result, result in essentially hopefully a one-time change in the term for elected officials. And what I was done all my research, basing my opinion on was an Attorney General's opinion from 2004 involving the city of Lauderdale Lakes. And I called down there and was able to get a copy of their ordinance when they did it. And the Attorney General opinion, as I understand it, was, again, there are certain things you can do by ordinance, there are certain things that require a referendum. And I talked to the commission at the last meeting that I thought simply changing the election date in terms of office, we could do that strictly by ordinance, no referendum needed. Lauderdale Lakes, even though they got that same opinion, they're the ones that asked for it, they did a referendum. And I haven't gotten to the bottom of why. You know, they went through the whole Attorney General opinion process and then kind of did it the old way anyway. That may have been political. And what they did was, in that, they essentially advertised the extended terms of office, call it prospectively. So people were running for an extended term, is what it looks like. And I wanted to get clarification, and then also, well, clarification on 2 things. One, and I talked to them very briefly about this, and she's always good about remembering exactly what we talked about in the meetings, was, are we going to, this ordinance that I'm drafting, is the intent to have it extend existing terms in office, or as the terms come up during the upcoming staggered cycle, is the intent to advertise those or put those on the ballot for an extent, basically saying, hey, you're going to run for a 5-year term. And that would go on the ballot, and people would run for that, for a commission seat that would last 5 years to get to the, and then the following year they'd run for a 1-year term, right? We'll figure out the math. But basically, instead of, again, everybody just running as we've always done for a 4-year term, every 2 years, then, to get everybody on in sync, to be staggered, they will be running for odd terms. And we've got 2 ways of doing it. We've got extending the people that are in office now by a certain amount of time to get on cycle, or basically as people come into office, advertise for extended terms. Or shortened terms.
Or have an election and run for a 1-year term, or either run for a 5-year term.
Exactly. To make it more complicated. But I mean, the math, we'll work out the math. And then the second question I have is, because this is what worries me as a lawyer. I do not want to be the lawyer that tells you, hey, we can do an ordinance, and we do an ordinance, and we change all this, and we get everybody lined up, and we start doing our elections, and then someone else down the road, we have a conclusion reached that, hey, you need to have a referendum. Because I believe, and I'll try to get to the bottom of it, that Lauderdale Lakes did a referendum anyway. They just put it on the ballot along with these extended terms so that they kind of cover themselves both ways. That they got this Attorney General's opinion, but they said, you know what, this is too important, because if you basically have a, call it illegitimate commission, all the decisions we make, everything else could get all tangled up. You got a statutory thing that says, hey, you only have so much time to challenge a decision made by a city commission. But leaving that aside, a referendum would clear this up, would through the regular charter amendment process, referendum would kind of put a stamp of approval on it that then there's no question of this. Can we do it by ordinance? Can we do it by, basically do it by both?
Mr. Harris?
Yes, sir?
May I just speak to that a second?
Yes.
From my experience.
Okay,
that
come
there
forward,
were
please, sir.
local acts
Would
in
you
Lauderdale.
would you please come forward? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and speak your name and,
Yes.
okay.
My name is Russell Sykes,
Okay.
and I'm a resident of Carrabelle. My experience is that there were some times when the same thing that I think you're just discussing here was accomplished by a local act filed by the legislature, went to a non-controversial counter. I think it came as a resolution from the commission to the legislator, as long as it doesn't butt heads with Chapter 175 election law. So that may be an avenue as well.
Very good.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not sure how to put it. Well, and Courtney and I we briefly discussed part of it yesterday, just mentioned it to one another and kind of in passing. But I feel like that we, this board, we need to make a decision. We need to make an informed decision, but we need to make a decision in a timely manner, because we're looking at an election in less than a year if we follow current procedures. And if we have that election in less than a year, then we're still out of cycle if we're going to make this change. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we need to make an informed and a correct decision, but we need to make it in a very timely manner. So we need to decide which way we want to go as well. That's my opinion.
And I agree as well. I mean, we would need to really begin working on this because if it was done by ordinance, it would take 2 to 3 months. And we do need to make a decision on it, because then we're coming into an election time, and if we want to put it up for referendum, well then this next election would be the time that you would put it on there, so you don't have to pay for another a referendum.
It's now on the bill, keep years thinking about spending more money than we need to spend. I mean, saving that $5,800.
Yeah, and elections do cost the city $5,800 every time we have an election, and if we combined our elections with the county elections, they would be free, basically free. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that. Right now, our elections run odd years, and the county elections run uneven years. So if we want to, and we've had workshops on it, we've had Ms. Heather Riley come by and talk to us about it. She, a special workshop with her, and she gave us a long presentation and showed us how we would save money. We've been over the budget, the cost for the election budget, and basically it would mean that this commission would, each person on here, if we go ahead and do an ordinance, each person on here we talk about extending the term. But if we don't, then we'll have another election coming up this 2019. And then at that time, we would need to decide in the ordinance, would these next people coming up, would they be running for 1 year? And it'd probably be a 1 year and a 3 year, so that they could get on a odd time. Or they would all run for a 5-year term. It would be, we would have to calculate that, as Dan said, we'd have to figure it out exactly how the terms would be. So we would still then, at that point, be paying for another city election. So, I don't know what to tell you.
Dan, are we trying to decide, I know you're looking at it from the legal standpoint. Is the board, is the commissioners here, are we needing to decide whether we want to extend current periods or have a election that for a 1-year term? Is that what we're trying to decide?
Yes, you're trying to decide whether to extend current periods or
Have an election?
have an election
City election.
where the commission, where it's,
For 1 year.
people are running for odd commission
Exactly,
terms.
to get us over into an even year.
That's right. Because one thing I'm positive about, that we can move the election from March, I'm sorry,
September.
September to November,
September.
no problem, by ordinance, that's not an issue. It's where we're gonna get into potential charter issues with the other, and and I'm comfortable, well, if I could just put that, the first question, the one you just mentioned, that is the big question. I can do the math, I'll try to get it in a form where we can make sure I did the math right, and,
Let me try a motion
okay?
for the board. I would like to make a motion that we extend the current commissioners and they need to speak up here if they want to say different. Extend the terms of the current board, commissioners sitting on the board for the 1 year period to get our cycles into an even year and coincide with the counties. And the reason why I make that motion is to save that $5,600 or whatever it is that we're going to have to spend on an election each one of those years to save that money. And that's my motion, is to extend current terms by 1 year to get those cycles over. And we have to do it on both cycles, am I correct? Keisha, isn't that right?
I can't say off the top of my head, I
Okay.
believe so.
That's my thinking, and Dan's supposed to, you working that out, and that's my motion, is to extend the cycles versus having an election
But that
for a 1 year period.
but that's not the way I understood. I thought either way was gonna have the referendum in
I'm not talking,
2019, so either way we'd have to have the election. Is that the way I understood it?
no, we would, if I'm right by what Dan's saying, of course, he's gonna decide whether we're gonna do a referendum or a,
What I'm gonna do is, what I'm thinking is to solve that part of the problem,
right,
I'm gonna follow exactly what Lauderdale Lakes did.
okay.
And we know what they did past
Right.
muster, and they've operated for the last 14 years.
And the only thing I'm making a motion on is extending current term seats by 1 year
And then we can figure out the math.
to coincide with those. So that's my motion.
Okay, so then we have a motion now by Commissioner Millender to extend current term cycles of this Board of Commission for 1 year, for a 1 year period to get our election cycles to even years to coincide with county elections. Okay. All right, so we have that motion by Commissioner Millender. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second by Commissioner Mathis. All right, now, do we have discussion? Any further discussion?
Can I just say one thing about
Yes.
you know what you all had to do to go through, to get elected? To ask somebody to run for 1 year and go through that cycle again is not a good idea, and you probably wouldn't get too many people interested in
Mr. Sullivan, I was trying to stay out of the political part of it, just do a cost savings.
Yeah. It is, if you think about it over a 10 or 20 year period, it will save some money. So is there any further discussion?
You know, I'm sorry, I know I'm making this more confusing than it needs to be, is reviewing their ordinance that they drafted to accomplish this. They opted to, with a lot of specificity, state that, you know, commencing with a future election, they actually went out 2 years. The candidates for city commission shall designate which seat they're running for, and they will, basically, they opted for the letting public, letting people run for the odd terms.
For the odd terms.
So the referendum would come in 2019. If the public voted for that, then the people would run in 2020 for the extra seat. Is that what you're saying? Or?
It is, yeah. So they say the general election, they move the election date to November, and then in November,
So the referendum would
They vote on
decide
the
whether
referendum.
you got an extra year or not. Is that what you're saying?
But if we do that for this next November,
For
there's 3 people on
September?
this board, or September, 3 people on this board's gonna have to run if we don't extend their terms.
Only if the
is there a
referendum.
when is the next?
Yeah, the
meeting?
referendum, what you're saying, and that the referendum won't be until the
No,
time
the
that they run
next
for office.
Of 2020.
2020.
Right. So we don't have an election cycle other than our own in 2019 to put the referendum
That's
on.
On your own.
That's correct. And at that time, if you wait until our election cycle for the referendum, that
Yeah,
means
it's too
Well,
late.
these
well,
3
the-
commissioners have to, or
The
2
2020
commissioners on there have to
primaries,
run.
would that be before ours? The primaries? 'Cause
Not
they
before our July or September. September of 19. They're November, but I know
The primaries are before that.
And they'll have, the county will have primaries in August
That's correct,
of 20.
of 20,
August.
yeah. The primaries are in August, and that's correct, it'll be in 20. The next one for the county, and for the state, and for the federal. And that's what we're trying to line ours with.
Right. I mean, either way, if we was gonna have to have an election, a special election, we could have an election, we could have a referendum anytime we wanted, we could mail out all the ballots.
That's a good point. I mean, we can just hold a referendum. Yeah, pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be paying for the early voting or anything like that, you know, you would just be paying for just that
And I
election.
think you need a,
But you wouldn't be
you
able to
gotta have notice for a
advertise.
referendum, like a mail-out referendum, like
Right.
90 days, something like that.
I can look up the requirements for that.
Time is of the essence for this year's cycle, and that's going back to that.
Right, but if we're following what they done, they did the referendum first,
Yeah,
before they extended or reduced terms.
I do, and I understand that, but time is of the essence.
Right, because
For us-
qualifying for us would be
For
July.
us to decide what these 3 seats are gonna happen, that's coming up for this year.
Okay, so we have a motion, and we can have another motion as well. We can continue this discussion here. We have this one motion right here, and then we could possibly have a motion discussing taking a referendum, directing Dan to find out about a referendum, what we would have to do for that, what is the time frame on that, and have that brought back in January to us as well as a proposed ordinance. But, so, go ahead.
I was just gonna reiterate that if we're gonna make the change and get it done this year, that January is gonna be pushing it tight to get it all done. But Dan's he's the attorney, I keep saying it, he's the one that's gonna have to give us some solid direction. and we're gonna have to be expedited in a hurry, and that's just my opinion.
And we got slowed down for Hurricane Michael and some, you know, just a couple of items that held us back a little bit. So we have this motion then, right now to extend the term cycles of the board for a period of 1 year to get our election cycles to coincide with county elections. And we have a motion and a second. And I'm going to call for a vote on that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed?
I
Okay, so we have 4 in favor and
can't vote for anything I can't understand.
Okay, and Commissioner Allen opposes. So then that motion carries. But once we get some detailed documentation from Mr. Hartman in January, then hopefully you'll have more clarification.
I will. I'll
Talk
to give you
talk to Dan about it as well. Okay, do we need to give you direction to find out about what we need to do to get a referendum underway?
I'll do that.
Okay,
Got it.
all right.
If we, of course, that's part of what Dan's job is to determine if we're gonna have to do the referendum or the other. So anyway, I'll leave it. That's good.
Okay, all right,
I'm thinking of the thousands of signs that are going to be out there.
all right. Do you have anything else, Mr. Hartman?
No.
Okay.
All right.
But we already discussed that our reports were going to take up quite some time tonight. So now we'll go to the city administrator's report.
All right, I was gonna give you guys an update on our FEMA assistance with, for the damages to city property that was caused in Hurricane Michael. We have completed our request for public assistance. We've had our first initial phone survey with FEMA. We have our first face-to-face meeting set up for January the 14th, and then that starts the clock. I think it's 60 and 90 days that we have to complete everything, have it in the system, and so we're on track and we're working on that. Progress on the new city hall, the door to the chambers. You know, they put in a door, and we wanted a door that had at least half glass on it. So they were gonna fix that. The door should be in by Monday, and they said they should have it installed by Wednesday. They're still waiting on the windows, the pane on the bottom to be exchanged out. He says he has not been able to get a hold of the window contractor, so he doesn't have a time for completion on that. The new sign, I talked to Mr. Sauls on November the 19th. He told me 3 weeks. That would be next week. I tried to get a hold of him today and was not able to. The dais, they came out on November the 6th and took some measurements. He said 6 weeks from then. So same thing, he said they were behind because of the storm, but they're working on it. I talked to him today. It's in production. I think the mayor reported on this earlier, but then we had a meeting, Russell and Dan and Brenda and I this afternoon, and talked about the punch list items that still need to be done at the city hall and how we need to proceed with getting some of that completed. And Russell he'll have more in his report on that. And I met with Mr. Sykes last week. He came in, we finally got our survey back on the property out in Lanark that he's interested in purchasing. And he came in and talked to me, and he hasn't, and he's here, he can answer any questions, but he hasn't been able to get an appraisal done on that property. But he did talk to me about, he made us a proposal on the entire piece, which was 3.2 acres, I believe. And because of the condition of the property with the down trees that he'd have to have removed and the creek bed that runs through there, he was proposing to purchase the piece of property for $11,000. Now, Charlie and I have talked about that since then, and we don't think that we really want to sell the entire piece of property, that there's property out there that Charlie wants to retain for the water and sewer department because of the easements that run through there. And we can discuss that more now, or we can bring it back as an agenda item.
What would you all like to do? Would you like to have that as an agenda item, or, and I do agree with, I just got a little survey of it here. This is the lift station, and Charlie would like to retain property across here along Newman Drive for future expansion. We need a larger lift station or access or whatever we may need there. And then there's also a roadway back here. My husband and I own property right here that adjoin that creek and that roadway. We're trying to find out if that roadway needs to be remained open according to the transfer agreement that we, because all of these folks use that roadway.
And you can see on that survey that most of them have outbuildings that encroach into that property.
And I feel like that these people that are along here, they would want some notification. Okay, all right, thank you. They've got their sheds actually over encroaching onto the water and sewer property right now, and they would need notification that something like this was going to happen. They might even like to have the opportunity themselves to purchase property directly behind them. So, you know, I don't know, personally, I don't agree with the whole 3.3 acres.
Sure. I'd be happy to sit down with Charlie and see if there isn't some way that we can come to a mutual agreement on what he wants and what's necessary for the city and for future growth. And, you know, I'm flexible.
If Charlie, if you want to talk to Mr. Sykes about that.
We can sit down anytime we want. We don't have to hold everybody up here.
No, not at all.
We can come back to this next month, you know, talk to it during the month and come back in the commission and inform them what we're doing. That's fine with me.
Whenever it's me.
Yeah, I have no problem.
And then we'll, what about if we just put this as an item on the January?
That's what I was going to
Okay.
motion to do.
All right, we'll just do that. Ms. Keisha, we'll put this as an item on the January agenda,
Yeah, I think
What
we-
date would that be?
January the 3rd.
Third. I'll be there.
Okay.
We have a proposal, we got a proposal from Florida Solar United.
Court, can I
Sure.
make a comment before we go into? You did mention that Mr. Sykes was unable to obtain an appraisal.
Right.
I think in the research of what our water and sewer superintendent's interest and need is, we need to look at that, and we need to look at some comps in the area with the land values.
And I did get a
Quite
comparative,
a bit of research.
I did get a comparative market analysis from from a realtor, so I do have that information.
Just wanted to comment on that, thank you.
So we've had a proposal from Florida Solar United to do a study to put in some solar power for our sewer plant. And Charlie's gonna speak on that a little bit more in depth. But they wanna do the study so that we can submit for a grant through DEP. And then DEP would pay, I think it was 80%, and we would pay 20% to do solar.
So the proposal that they have is, they want to do a planning contract, Florida Solar United. They want to do a planning study to study exactly what the needs would be out at the wastewater treatment plant to set it up as a solar system. And that planning study would be $25,000. And they say if we were to get a loan from the DEP, SRF, State Revolving Fund loan, that the DEP would forgive 50%, that it would be a $12,500 cost to the city. And then that does not include engineering or installation of the system, and then that we would have to move further with the DEP and get a loan from the DEP, which the reps from the Florida Solar United say that the DEP would also offer a 70 to 80% forgiveness on the loan for the system. So, did you want to speak more on that, sir? We were trying to pass
Pretty
time.
much covered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless
There's a
they-
possibility you could go to 100%, but you know that there's salespeople and they're trying to push their stuff. I wouldn't say that it would be 100%. You know, at 80-20, it's not that bad. We kind of looked at about a 4-year payback is what it looks like.
A 4-year,
In the savings of electricity cost of the wastewater treatment system.
so it would take, after 4 years, then you would begin to realize a profit or break even on the cost of the system.
And what this would do is the solar would go into a grid, and then Duke Energy would credit us back. So it wouldn't really be power in the plant, but it would be producing power that goes back to Duke Energy.
So what you're saying is it would take 4 years of solar power being produced back to Duke Energy for us to recoup our investment? Okay. What about the maintenance?
They have very little maintenance. We talked to them on the phone, we had a conference call with them. I go into the warranties better, I don't have that much information on your maintenance. They say there's little to none, is what they tell me. You have to wash them, you have to keep them clean, bird poop off them, the algae that grow on them, stuff like that. It's gonna limit the amount of sun that they intake. They're warranted for the amount of power that they use, or that they produce, for 25 years. They're supposed to last for 40.
And I did ask about the maintenance, and actually, they really weren't able to give a specific answer on it because it would depend upon the company that you purchased the solar system from. They would be doing the warranty and the maintenance, so, you know, just like you purchase a refrigerator from this one or this company, that would be your warranty. So, but what this company is selling, they are just selling the study. They want to come in and study the wastewater treatment plant and see what the needs are and put that down in paper, and that study would be $25,000. That does not include the engineering, is that correct, of the design or the actual equipment, nothing like that. And they have a contract that I'm suggesting that we ask Dan to review the contract to do this planning study. And we need to learn about Duke's reimbursement policy.
I did talk to Duke Energy, or our representative, and what he explained was the power would go into the grid and it would come off the power bill. At the end of the year, if we had leftover money on the meter or to where they would owe us money, it would be paid out on an annual basis.
Okay. And then, okay.
How large of a
5,000 kW.
No, how large in area? How large in size?
It does take up a pretty good portion of the, around the backside of the wastewater plant. It all fits on our site
On the site here
in Carrabelle.
in Carrabelle?
But we were proposing to do it in
In Leonard.
Leonard.
And that was my next item here, that we would need to know the exact location. There, I saw on one of their drawings, they were proposing it here.
Yeah.
And at one point, we talked about the spray field in Lanark too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be hooked up to the wastewater treatment plant, because you're just
It
selling.
just
you're
provides
making it-
power to the
Yeah.
system, to the grid.
And then we need to contact the DEP to make sure that this is an actual program, that they're offering a solar program with their will give 50% off forgiveness. So we have to get a loan from the DEP to qualify for 50% off on the planning study. And then we would have to continue with another loan from the DEP for the project, for the engineering and the actual project. project where they would give 70 to 80%, but we haven't talked to the DEP to make sure that that they would really do that. We need to know what a payment estimate would be, what the terms would be. Would they require a rate study to be done to get a loan? Sometimes they do require that, and, you know, there might be a possible payment increase, possibly not. It's hard to say. So I think we need to have Mr. Dan Hartman review the contract and bring us back. Maybe we'll put it on the agenda, or you can report under your report next month. Tell us about the contract. The sales agents wanted to be here tonight. Then they were anxious for us to go ahead and schedule a special meeting next week, but I said no, because I want to hear about the contract first from Dan without being pressured by sales agents.
Well, I would like to go a step further, because I've got tiny experience with solar systems. We tried a solar system with ag, and there's been a lot of improvement for the last 20 years. We tried a solar system that wasn't exactly what we thought it was going to be, and it didn't pan out. We lost the system because it became too cost intense and maintenance and other issues. Where I'm going with my question is I'd like to see us do. I'm interested in the program because if we can save the money. Charlie and I have talked about saving money on power bills and different things, but I would like to see us find out from some of these solar farms that are currently in existence, and find out the pros and cons of the solar systems and their maintenance and operational costs and those kind of things. I'd like to see us do some research on that before we go into contracts and spending a lot of money.
I did ask if they had done a planning study for any solar systems on wastewater treatment plants or water plants in the state of Florida that were up and running now, and no, they did not have anything, but have you been
They have started in Georgia, and they're just moving into Florida.
There's some in other states. I'm not up to speed on them, but there are some solar farms in other states like we're describing here, and try to find out their pros and cons.
And I don't know if this would even be something that if we decided we wanted to do solar, we would just put out a request for proposal. I just don't know best for that. And I do want to remind you that we are working on a possible loan application with the USDA for water line installation in lighthouse estates. And then now we're going to talk about, so Dan, will you, okay, contract Dan.
We still on city clerk?
No, we haven't gotten that far yet.
No, we're not,
I'm
no.
sorry, city
Yeah.
Hurry up.
So, hurry up.
And now we're gonna talk about another loan.
Another loan.
Another loan. As the mayor reported on her report, Timothy Banks with DEP gave us a call, and DEP is offering an SRF loan to communities that were affected by Hurricane Michael. And what it would be infrastructure in the water and sewer department that may not be covered under our insurance. So Charlie does have a project in mind, and it is the lift station at Sands North, which is way out, our last stop going to the east. And it was flooded. So what we were needing to do is replace all the electrical, but bring it up to code and bring it up in the elevation. So that was an 80-20 grant. We're gonna have to have it done anyway. If we go ahead and do it through DEP, it's possible that we only have to pay for 20% of it, not 100% of it.
Yeah, saltwater got the reaction.
Yeah, about 3 foot inside the panel box.
But this is legitimate, because the gentleman did call. He called myself and he called Keisha back about 6 weeks ago. And he does want to offer us some help in any way that we can. So if we could possibly get 80% off but he wants to, they've got $1 million that they're going to give to affected cities with utilities in the area. And somewhere project around, 100 to 300 because there's so many, and they've got they're gonna be putting a lot of forgiveness into Mexico City to help get them back online. So we're gonna look into that with the approval of the commission, if that's all right.
I'll make a motion to go forward, that sounds good.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Millender to move forward with working with the DEP and their SRF forgiveness program offer. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second by Commissioner Mathis. Do we have discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then that motion carries. And Courtney, would you just tell us real quick about the water sewer labor applications?
We have 4 that have came in. The deadline is tomorrow. I have one that has been submitted online. I didn't get it, but he said he emailed it today, so it possibly 5 at this time.
Okay.
We'll be reviewing those applications.
Well, that would be on the January 3rd agenda. Okay. All right. Y'all, do you have anything else, Ms. Courtney?
Jared passed his test.
Congratulations.
One other thing, I have an update for Brian Cathy on the Taylor building at the airport, but I'll wait until you do your airport report.
Wonderful. Tell Jared congratulations.
Yes.
We're happy for all of you there. Okay. Y'all have any more questions for Ms. Courtney? Okay. Ms. Keisha, do you have anything? No. Do you know off your, do you know when the city hall is going to be closed for Christmas and New Year's? Do y'all know those dates?
The 24th and the 25th will be Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
And then half a day on the 31st, which is a Monday, and all day the 1st will be Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you very much. All right, then we will move on to Russell. Inovia.
All right, thank you. On the Avenue B project, the CRA board authorized to proceed with construction of phase 2 for this project. That would extend from 5th to 3rd Street along Avenue B and 4th Street from US 98 to Avenue B. The Department of Economic Opportunity, who is the grant agency, has approved this change order. We've sent paperwork to the contractor, waiting for his signature. We will be sending out information letters to each of the affected property owners which have direct frontage on those segments. And we would ask for their input, in particular related to driveways, and all that's described in a letter that's to be mailed out. Okay, on Keogh's addition, DOT has finally approved that project to proceed for bidding. We've placed advertisements. There will be in the Tallahassee Democrat on December 9th and the 16th, Apalachicola Times on December 13th and December 20th. And the bid opening is scheduled for January the 22nd, that's a Tuesday, at 1:30.
And yay,
Right.
yippee yay for that. We've been working on that since late 13, 14.
That's right.
So yes, I know they're happy out there. Thank you.
Sure. We've already touched on City Hall. The contractor is working through the punch list items, and we'll be providing some communication to them to find out when they expect to be wholly complete with that project. There are some outstanding items that are owed, such as the as-built survey and then some construction items that need to be corrected. So we're going to push hard on the contractor to get that complete. I did want to address the 11th Street drainage issue there as it relates to the Oxendine property. This is actually not a new problem. That problem has existed for some time. In fact, we looked at that, I'm trying to remember, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We did develop a sketch plan to correct the issue there. 11th Street is a county road, which we determined at that time. And so we deferred that project to the county. It sounds like based on what Mr. Oxendine described, that they did attempt to fix the issue, but not successfully. So what we discussed today was that we would resurrect that sketch plan that we put together and put that forward as part of the hazard mitigation grant program that we would request monies for. I'll be happy to answer any questions on that.
Now, I had mentioned to you that, could you, and I would have to ask the commission to vote on it, prepare us a scope of work to kind of give us an idea of what it would cost for engineering and surveying.
Certainly, I will, yes.
Is that all right? Do you need a motion for that, for Inovia to do us a scope of work on that? 'Cause we'll need that anyway when we apply, if we apply for a grant for it.
On the level description?
I think we need a motion, certainly, with our
Sure.
record for the city.
Sure.
Okay. And what we understood today at this mitigation meeting is that Mr. Schuler, the county attorney, is preparing a list of roads in the city that...
Well, he's been back and forth with Dan.
Okay.
And it started out, us having discussion with the road department and them asking what roads belong to the county. We told them, you know, it was Timber Island Road and Airport Road, and that these are county roads, they're marked on the map, county road. And so they come back and said, no, anything in the city belongs to the city. So Dan and Michael Schuler have been back and forth with that, and even our comprehensive plan lists these roads as county roads. So there's the background on that.
They trying to pull the state of Florida and give us all that, right?
All right,
That's exactly.
what I advised Michael Shule that our position was as far as county roads, River Road, County Road 67, County Road 30A, Ryan Drive, which is County Road 67-A, Timber Island Road, and Airport Road. And we've been mild disagreement over that.
But we can still move forward with pursuing a mitigation grant for that location and another location that we've identified.
I have a question about that. Would the application be made by the county? I heard you say Mr. Schuler was developing that, a list.
From what I understand today, they're saying that they're all city roads. That's their,
Dan, when I just heard you read off that list of roads, did you mention Gulf Beach Drive?
that is in the county.
That's in the county.
City limits is not out there.
Does 98 still belong to
Part
the
of
county
it's
station?
in the city, isn't it?
No.
Do we own 98 too?
We stopped before MZ's.
Huh?
We stopped before MZ's on that side.
Okay, I must be thinking of another road. I'm thinking of the one in front of Pat Bragg.
Oh, that's C30, it's on.
See, okay.
And that's half and half, and we discussed that today too, and we're actually gonna try to get us a city limit sign up there, in that location near that pond.
That's right.
Remind me of that, I forgot about it.
I wrote it down.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Russell, we'll let you continue now.
Thank you.
Did you-
That's all I have. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Don't let us interrupt you.
I have a question for Russell. The Avenue B, not trying to be negative, but the contractor, is his pace still about the same? That's the way I see it. And I'm not trying to be negative, trying to be positive.
Yeah, yes. It has slowed. I know, I've heard that he's spent some time at Tyndall with some work as it relates to Hurricane Michael.
Right.
But regardless, he needs to finish this project.
Yes.
We're about to do a change order for a new segment.
Yes.
And we have a time frame, a specific time frame for that to be completed. Now, we had anticipated we would add this segment. So the time given was, it's still within that framework.
What,
So,
do you know what the deadline on that is? Current?
I do.
we sent that change order form, and I'm sorry, I don't
You
remember.
want me
but
to
you
say
probably
it's
did.
March the 29th,
Okay.
2019,
March 2019.
and they need to get
Wow.
rolling over there.
Right.
That's all I have to say, but thank you.
All right. Thank you.
We could bump that up, that would be good.
Well, that's March 29th for the whole kit and caboodle.
That's the entire project, complete final payment
Without the change order? No, no.
with the change order.
That's everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, then, Ms. Tamara.
Got a lady back there waiting on me.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you say about 11th Street? Is it gonna be part of the engineering report or not?
Yes.
11th Street, we just had the engineer report, and we just had a long discussion on it.
I know, but I thought there was something up for a motion and then nothing happened.
We didn't have to motion on it, we just directed the engineer to produce a scope of work for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I had emailed my report to you all, and in the interest of time, I would like to give you back my 3 minutes and just
Okay, thank you.
tell you that I want to encourage the public and everybody to be sure that all the kids of all ages come down and see Santa on Saturday. Santa will be receiving visitors from 2 to 4 and 5 to 7. And we're very fortunate this year to have a local photographer who's going to be taking, with consent forms, so it's going to be taking photographs for the family, and that they'll be sending, we'll be making available on our website if people get it. So they'll have a way to download the pictures.
That'd be
So it'll
nice.
be a nice addition to Carolyn Photography is the name of the organization. So that adds another sponsor along with Mr. Hartman to Santa and our success this year.
Very good.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms.
And
Tamara.
Terry Brothers.
Thank you, Ms. Tammy.
We'll see if the Christmas town. We're that Christmas best. Okay, so next, we have no Economic Development Council.
No, but I'll mention that Courtney and I attended the EDC board meeting yesterday in Mariana. And just to give you a real quick on it, not to make any time, most of it was primarily focused on hurricane relief, and that was it. Good meeting. We were there, though, and represented the city of Carrabelle.
Wonderful, that's a good thing. It's always good to be out there on the state level. And I just wanted to say real quick that Ms. Linda Cowan called me at 5:30 and resigned as chairperson of the EDC. So,
Today?
yes, at 5:30. Okay, all right then, the Carrabelle Aviation Advisory Board.
Good evening. We met last month, and we would like to recommend appointing Gordon Hunter and Sam Eads as alternate members to the Carrabelle Advisory Board.
And they're both here tonight. Mr. Sam Eads is there in the blue shirt, and Mr. Gordon Hunter is there you go, in the maroon orange colored rust shirt there. And they're, go ahead and tell about them if you'd like to a little bit. Or?
Well, Sam, he's got a house down there on the end of Marine Street. He's been very helpful at the airport. He's a frequent visitor there, and he's helped us out in both events that we've had there. Mr. Hunter, Gordon Hunter is a retired Delta pilot. Was in the same Navy unit as Senator McCain, and he has a long flying record. He owns an airplane. He has it over at Apalachicola because we don't have hangars here, of course. And he's been active with the Apalachicola Airport also.
And so then we need a motion to approve or disapprove these recommended 2 alternate members, Mr. Sam Eads and Mr. Gordon Hunter, to serve on the Aviation Advisory Board.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, together. All right, and that motion is by Commissioner Millender, second by Commissioner Walden. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then that motion carries.
Okay, the next item was the Grantham hangar. It was discussed by Dan, but can we take possession of that hangar and rent it out?
No, not yet.
Okay. Because I have a misunderstanding about that. We asked FDOT and they said that your hangar you should have possession of. If rent's not being paid on.
Part of the action that we filed was an eviction action and collection of money, back payments. And since they moved to set aside the default isn't final. Once the default's final, I can apply for writ of possession and legally, basically have the legal right to take possession of the hangar. If you have any direction, sometimes there's federal preemption stuff. That's what I think.
I'll take a look up. I'll talk
Tell
to
them
them.
to send anything they have, certainly send it my way.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. The new hangar, what you said, that update from Kathy Construction.
I talked to Brian Cathy with Cathy Construction this afternoon. He said he's been in contact with Mark Carroll, who is with Jason White Construction. He said that looks like there's not going to be any additional costs associated with making the repairs that are needed, that they just need further clarification from the engineer, Mr. Jacks, and that he had a list of questions for Mr. Jacks to answer. Is when they got those back, that they were ready to be on site and get the job finished as soon as possible.
Great.
So he was supposed to email me over those questions so that I can get them to Mr. Jacks, but I was surprised when he said no cost associated, no
That's great.
additional cost.
Also with the runway taxi light repair, the city attorney had sent Ram Construction a letter explaining the situation, and upon receiving that letter, they called me immediately and said that they'll make good for whatever they need to do to make it right and make sure we're happy. So in both times, Dan has come through for us. It really moved it forward.
We were talking this evening in our meeting that we needed him to send a couple more letters to a
Yes.
couple of other folks.
We don't want to get reliant on people hopping to necessarily not that work out on those, of course.
Good outcomes, yeah.
We received the study back from Kimley Horn on the damage from the recovery logistics staging area. They came back with they looked at temporary localized stopgap repairs, and they looked at major rehabilitation, which is would bring the pavement, would rehabilitate it with the stress and the condition level is what they're recommending. The localized stopgap repair is going to be, they're estimating like $321,000. To rehabilitate it, it would be closer to $2.8 million. I'm going to meet with the FDOT Thursday next week, and we're going to discuss it and see. We're in the pavement improvement program that monitors the pavement, and they schedule out all the pavement in the state priority by the condition it's in. Now, because of this damage, we'll find out where we fit in that scheme, and then I'll show them these figures and see what they suggest is the right way to go.
And I have asked Courtney to check with Mr. Danny Collins to see if we have a written agreement of sorts, like in particular a land use agreement with Duke or Progress Energy, which would have brought over to Duke.
I have not heard back from him yet.
Okay. Let us know, we'll get the attorney.
But I did send him an email yesterday, so I know he's very busy.
Okay, Commissioner Millender.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I spent some time out there at the airport, and not an engineer, don't profess to be, but and I saw what has been described to me as damage, and my observation is there is some damage, but I don't see $2.8 million worth. I'm not.
Okay.
I see a lot of necessary maintenance and some asphalt issues, but I don't see those as being solely caused by the equipment that was out there. Looks like it's aging process to me on quite a bit of it. I looked at the holes in the ground where they had the tent pegs, or not holes in the ground, but holes in the asphalt where they did the tent pegs. I looked at the hangar issue, which I'm glad to hear that we're moving forward on that. But anyway, that's just my assessment.
With the, if you look at the stopgap repairs they're talking about, that would stop the deterioration of the damage that was done. But the reason why we had Kinley Horn come in and take a look at it, because we're not experts on pavement either. They are. They're the ones that do it for the state. And they did a very thorough study, and you can get Courtney would have a link to that study. It shows the vehicles and the indentations where they were parked on that. There's obvious damage, and there's damage that is not obvious at all. That ramp is built for 6,000-pound airplanes. The vehicles they had on there were some of them 70,000 pounds. It's a thin layer of pavement, not built for heavy-duty traffic, and that's what it got on there. So if you get a chance to look at that through that report, it's very lengthy, but they'll have pictures, and they'll have pictures of the before and after on the asphalt, and they'll have pictures of where the vehicles that were parked there that caused that damage. And that's the thing is, it aged the pavement was in poor condition to begin with. That's the category it was in according to the FDOT. So we started off with poor condition, but it's due to age. And as it ages, it deteriorates faster as it gets old. But when you put things on it that it was never designed for, it's hard to estimate what it did to the damage for the length of the age of it now. So we don't know what the long-term effects of the aging on what has been done other than the stopgap measure. But it certainly would age it quite a bit. You'll see there's a lot of stress cracks there. You won't see the damage that was done for maybe a year or two, but then it'll stop hitting. The $2.7 or $2.8 million, yeah, that would make it better than it was. Definitely a lot better than it was. But to do the stopgap measure, you can't put it back to where it was. You either got to make it better or just patch what you got. There's no bringing it right back to where it was before they moved in there.
So the 2.8, that's major rehab. I mean, that would be like, reconstruction of it, to just completely rebuild it, I believe.
Not completely rebuild it. I don't, in the report it tells you exactly what it is, but it's not really rebuilding, it's rehabbing it, which, like the runway, or to redo the runway, you can pave over it, or you can pull it up and redo it, and the cost difference is astronomical. But
so basically, though, it accelerated the aging process, or maybe it was going to be completely worn out in 5 years. Now it's going to be completely worn out in 3 years.
Right, but they can't give you a final. They can't estimate exactly that, but it definitely does age on it. Especially these areas where they have the indents, they have standing water on there now when it rains. There's puddles all over there where the tires and the forks from the trucks and the forklifts and all. There's standing water there now where there wasn't before. And that makes it deteriorate even faster.
And they did also had trucks on the new parking lot at the city hall, which has weight restrictions as well. So, we'll need to monitor that in the future if we have any kind of problems. Go ahead, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay, and FDOT also is, they're looking at taking a database of the Carrabelle Airport and doing this throughout the state, taking each airport and showing which area can be used, what it can be used for, what the restrictions are on it. So in the future, you'll be able to have any airport in the state, you'll be able to see where you can put things and where you can't put things. So, it's actually going to be a good thing for everybody statewide when they accomplish this, and they're going to use, hopefully use Carrabelle as a test bed for the project. I met with the Walden County EOC director and the airport manager, talked about how they handle their situation with the staging. Got some really good points on that. And then again, I have this meeting next Thursday to talk about the damage done. and to update the master plan and all the other projects. And we have the appropriate inspection on December 19th, as we completed all the tree removal, so we can get it re-inspected and get a full license. Any questions?
Thank you for your work.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much. Let's hear the HR committee report, and then we'll take a little recess here, okay? Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
That's all right. Thank you. I did that with my coffee this afternoon. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to be very brief, and because I know that we have an agenda item coming up later on in the meeting. The Human Resource Committee met twice during the month of November, on the 14th and the 28th. On the 14th, we discussed basically the city administrator's job description. And we got that to a place where we think we were comfortable in submitting a final draft format to the city commission, which you have now. And I see that there were some suggestions already made on that job description. Brenda, I saw the suggestions that you made, and we certainly can, and they certainly look good and appropriate. So we also, Tony, during that meeting, suggested that members of the committee look at the city charter. And I believe most or all the committee members were familiar with the city charter. I wasn't, so I read that, and just to see how that kind of affects our thinking on how to complete these job descriptions. So I thought it was a beneficial thing for us to look through that and to discuss that somewhat too. The next meeting, which was held on November 28th, at that time we went line by line over the city clerk's job description. Got that to a place where we thought we were comfortable in submitting that job description to the commission, which we've done. And in addition, we have the financial administrative assistant job description on the docket tonight to discuss. And with that, we will, once those job descriptions, those three are approved, we will have a job description for every job in the city. So we consider that an accomplishment. And then we're going to move on with a meeting on December 12th to look at the evaluation form. And that'll be the next business of the committee to establish an evaluation form for all city employees. So, and that's about it.
Very good. Do you all have questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. John.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and we thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you and Miss May.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for working with our staff and developing, I believe it was 13 job descriptions. We certainly appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, then we'll take a recess here and come back, and we have 2 new business items, and that will be it for us. Call this meeting back to order now. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing, and we have none. Then we're going to come on into new business. Item number 1, discussion of possible action regarding planning and zoning recommendations. The one is for the Franklin Mini Storage Edition, and I see we have a plan here. Did you want to speak to that, Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Large? Are they here, the folks that are requesting this?
No,
Okay.
but,
Yes, please, thank you.
Russell Large representing the applicant, Mr. Tim Bray. This item was heard by planning and zoning. I'll briefly summarize it if you have any questions. We have any answer. This is for mini storage building project. It's fronts Airport Road, the access will be off Airport Road. The site consists of 4 acres. The property zone C1, mixed use commercial. Mini warehouse is a principal permitted use in the zoning district. In terms of the Carrabelle permitting requirements, this project is not within the coastal high hazard area. It's not within the V zone. The requirement there is that the coastal high hazard, in the coastal high hazard area, is that the buildings are set back 50 feet from the mean high water line. Even if it were in that zone, it would meet that. The mean high water line is well above 50 feet from the site. Secondly, the critical shoreline overlay district, this project does fall in that district. In this overlay district, it extends 150 feet inland from wetland areas. And within that area, the impervious area shall not exceed 20%. And for this project, we meet that by a 12% impervious area. So we're well under that restriction. This project will require utilities and a stormwater facility, and the applicant will, of course, have to pay the TAP fees in accordance with city requirements, and will have to obtain a stormwater permit from the Water Management District. The Planning and Zoning Board did recommend approval, and that was a unanimous vote. So we would also recommend approval contingent upon the receipt of all permitting requirements.
Okay, now this is accessed off Airport Road.
Yes.
And will one of the units, either one of them be climatized? Do you know anything?
He did say that one would be.
And one would be, okay. And then your retention pond then is back here to the west,
Right.
farthest to the west. Okay, and then which one of these lots, are they on this second lot?
Yes.
Back here to the
Yes,
to the west?
and you can kind of see how
The original.
that's right.
Okay.
You can kind of see how the this connection
Okay.
here connects to the existing site.
All right, thank you.
Make a motion, we approve this request as submitted by Mr. Walden.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Millender to approve the request for the Franklin Mini Storage Addition.
I
As presented. Okay, we have a second by Commissioner
Allen.
Allen.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then that motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, the next item is transmission of the EAR determination letter. I'll just say real quick, we had a combined workshop on the 13th where Mr. Fetchek explained the DEO is requiring the EAR determination letter to be submitted by Carrabelle on April the 1st, 2019. He presented 2 options: submit a letter that reads that the city's determined that no amendments are needed to the comp plan, or submit a letter that has identified changes that will be needed in the comp plan, and that would demonstrate our good faith in the city's planning process. So they were to vote on that and make a recommendation at the P&Z meeting immediately following that. And then at that same workshop, he recommended some, with a PowerPoint presentation, amendments to the 2014 comp plan that didn't get submitted back in 2014. And he said as soon as the DEO receives that determination letter, if needed, we could go ahead and submit the updated 2014 comp plan that we reviewed on the 13th. So how did what did the P&Z recommend for the EAR letter? What did they recommend?
To send a letter stating that we basically identified some need for changes and that we would submit the same, and then we get too much right to submit the package.
Okay.
Following the letter.
All right. So now we need to vote on approval or disapproval of the recommendation of the planning and zoning to submit to the DEO a determination letter that says we have identified some changes to the comp plan.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have that motion by Commissioner Mathis.
Second.
Okay, and a second by Commissioner Allen. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Okay, and that motion carries. All right, very good. Now we'll move on to old business. Item number 1, discussion and possible action concerning the final job descriptions completed by the Carrabelle HR Committee. And we have 3 job descriptions that we had an opportunity to review: the Finance, HR Administrative Assistant, City Clerk, and City Administrator. And I did have some changes or additions, and I don't know if everybody had an opportunity to look at those or what. Just a few to the HR, to the City Clerk, and then a couple of typo type things to the other 2. And also, I think I would like to see on all of our job descriptions, whether to identify whether they're essential or non-essential personnel during times of a disaster. And then on these 3, we didn't identify who might be the property manager. We need somebody to manage our property. We have someone that does that now here for this big city hall, and we need to identify that. And also, I went ahead and made the entry on public records request. Our city clerk is our official record keeper, and public record would handle public records requests, I believe, with the assistance of the other 2, with the assistance from the finance clerk and the city administrator.
I have something I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
Regarding the city administrator job description, notice it's responsible for management of city government. I was looking at our charter, and in section 9, article 2, the form of government for the city of Carrabelle provided for under this act shall be known as the commission plan, or in the event of the appointment of a city manager as herein provided, it'll be the commission manager plan. Just a little background on that. Back when Mr. McGinnis was working he was our city manager, and he was an official city manager, and by that I mean he's a card-carrying city manager. But when we look at the information from the League of Cities, under manager administrator, the council manager from the form of the municipal government provides for a separation of legislative and executive powers. Legislative authority is vested in the council, while a manager appointed by the council serves as chief administrator, and depending on local preference, the administrator position may be titled manager or administrator. I have a little book that I got from the course that I took when I went to how to be a good new city commissioner, and there was a paragraph to this very effect, and it said that there on page 43, I can still see it, there's no legal distinction between city manager and an administrator unless, and then they have a paragraph that says, if you have an official city manager, which is a different status from what we have here, then it would be only appropriate to call them city managers. Now, when it started out, Courtney was appointed as an administrator to serve in that time. And she was young, just getting started, and worked under Mr. McGinnis and learned real well. And in the meantime, we've had quite a few years go by. She has worked hard, taken a lot of courses, knows a lot about what's going on. And since there's really no physical difference by law of administrator or manager, I would like to make a motion that we change the title in all of our paperwork to make her a city manager. It has a lot more, I think, meaning to the public, and that's really the work she's doing, even though she can do it as administrator. It's not between twiddly-dee and twiddly-dum. fix it, but I just think it would be nice, not that we can give her a raise or anything, we might give her an extra key to the ladies' room or something or other to, as a promotion, but, it's not a promotion, it's just a change of title for the same job. And I'd like to make a motion that we make that change in all of the documents that refer to our work.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Allen to change the title of the city administrator to city manager, and we have a second by Commissioner Mathis. Is there discussion?
Now, will this require us to give her a pay raise?
I'm sorry?
Will this require a pay raise?
No,
Or are you just changing her title?
it's just a title, it's not a pay raise.
Now, have we done a job description on city manager?
No, when we have the job description of city administrator, all that does is become city manager. Everything in the job description, that's the only thing that changes.
Well, there's quite a bit of distinction. I have a difference of opinion with a city manager and a city administrator. There's quite a bit of distinction between those two, and I feel like if we make this position a city manager, it's going to narrow our window of opportunity if the city ever needs to expand into a city manager position. Well, with that city manager position would come a lot more responsibility and money to go along with it.
Not necessarily, you're talking about the qualified member of the City Managers Association. That would be true, but in this case here, it is not, doesn't even affect this.
Well, I disagree with you.
Well, you can check the law, and here's the thing that came out in the,
Okay.
and I had a discussion with this
I
too.
see,
The point is that John McGinnis was a city manager, and all that you said about city manager would certainly apply to him. But it does not apply to, in this case here, because it's only a matter of appointment.
Okay,
And that's in the,
and Mr. Magna wants to speak as
Well,
well.
I just want to say, did you want to go first, Bert?
Well, go ahead, sir.
Well, I mean, after reading the city charter, I did bring this up in the meeting, and, should we change that job title to city manager? And there are some differences in the city charter to what Courtney is doing right now, So, it would change the duties of the job, I think, if, according to the city charter, and I think that, and I'd like to get some other feedback from committee members about that, because it was something that was discussed. And whichever way you go, it really doesn't matter to me. I mean, I think it's up to the commission to make that determination, but you should do it with the knowledge that some things may change as far as job duties go, should that decision be made to switch that job title.
in the job description, she's responsible for management of city government. Provides administrative, technical, and management advice, information, and so on to the boards. Then directs, manages, supervises, plans, coordinates, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's not one thing that would change in this job description by changing that word. That's the point I'm making, and I believe I'm right in that, and I'm supported by the League of Cities for Florida.
What about hiring?
It's exactly what she would do as an administrator she's doing now.
Okay.
Nothing changes
Like I
except
said, I would
that word.
suggest that you review the city charter. And it's not because I, like I say, it doesn't matter to me. I've got no dog in this fight,
Well, here's what the
It's,
city charter says.
We should know what's in the charter.
The city charter says that the commission plan, or in the event of the appointment of a city manager, is herein provided the commission manager plan. So we would be in following exactly what our charter says, and that would put us right in line with that.
I think there's more to it than
yes,
just that.
and I do believe, and first of all, Courtney, with the utmost respect.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
definitely. This has nothing to do with.
Me too,
person.
I have great respect for
And Ms. Courtney does work. She is working. Yes,
Well, like Mr.
Okay.
Tom said, we had this discussion in our HR.
all right, okay. I feel like that, first of all, this commission would need to vote on whether it wanted to go to the commission manager plan or to, or stay as we are right now. I agree with what you say, Commissioner Allen, that, the job duties wouldn't change. The job duties are the job duties, but then I also agree with Commissioner Millender's opinion that if, and with the utmost respect, Ms. Courtney, that it would close the, it would close the window of opportunity if the city grows, and that if then we needed to hire a card-carrying manager. Now, how would we do that? Would we have a manager 1 and a manager 2? How would we do that? And I have studied in the past, when I first came on board, I researched manager versus an administrator. What does that mean? And the manager really has even more duties than a city administrator.
Tremendous amount.
Yes.
That's
they
right,
have
in the case of, but that's not what we have here, because we have in our charter a city manager, commission manager plan.
Well, let's read part of the charter, what else is.
It's just the title, and it says it's just a matter of personal preference, my preference.
Right, and we have not, we're not operating under the city manager plan at this moment. Are you looking like you wanted to weigh in, Mr. Hartman?
Yes.
Okay.
No, and this is, and certainly Commissioner Allen, correct me if I'm wrong, is I literally think what you are talking about is just changing the name on this piece of paper. You are not talking about going to the commission manager plan. You're just talking about, instead of calling Courtney a city administrator, call her a city manager.
That's right.
Okay.
It's just that simple.
And that is, as you say, a matter of just literally labeling like that. However, from the lawyer standpoint, I don't think they'll get me in trouble, is that if I was from the outside looking in, and someone said I'm city manager, and I would look at the charter and say, okay, what is the city manager's duties? And if there was something there, it would potentially cause confusion from the outside. If you had a city manager in Carrabelle, because I lived through most of the John days, hiring and when he came and when he left, and yeah, so I understand that's probably part of the confusion in this conversation, is you're not proposing we go to a commission manager plan, you're just proposing, hey, let's call it a city manager instead of city administrator because it sounds better. Yeah, that's all you're saying. But that is, from my lawyer position, it just could lead to some confusion, because if I didn't sit through this conversation, and I showed up a year from now and wanted to understand by looking at the charter what Courtney's role was, and she's called the city manager, then I would assume we're operating under a commission manager.
And then what I would want, I would want the HR committee to go back and develop a job description for a manager.
And it would be different.
Well,
Yes, it would be different.
and it also, again, and like Courtney said and Tom said, we discussed this in the HR committee, and it would restrict us as city government.
No.
Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
It doesn't.
Excuse me?
Nothing changes.
It does. It does.
Only
I know
in your mind
you don't say that, but it does. It changes quite a bit.
It changes because,
Yes.
because if the city expands, or now let's just use Apalachicola as an example.
There you go.
They felt like they needed more expertise, than they had, with all due respect to Ms. Mathis. But they wanted someone, let's just say, that had a master's degree in business administration with several years of experience, and they felt like they needed that. And so they hired a manager, a person specifically, and they put out a request for proposal and hired a manager. Now, if the city grows and if we have sufficient funds, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, even 5 or 10 years from now.
That's correct.
We may not be here, our jobs are not guaranteed, and then they need to hire a city manager. How will that work?
Well, they'd go get a guy that's got the card. Say you're down
Then what? You would demote the current manager? I mean, how?
Well, you could change her back to administrator. It's the same thing.
No.
Let's vote on this thing.
All right, you want to vote?
I want to vote.
Is everybody ready to vote?
I want to say something. This ain't got nothing to do with Courtney.
No, it does not.
Courtney is doing a
She's doing a
fantastic
good
job. And if we give her the title of city manager without going through this HR committee, I don't think that'd be right. Do we need a city manager right now? No. The girl's doing a fantastic job. And I think if we promote her, we'd have to give her a pay raise.
No.
And I don't think she'd have a problem with that.
Well, that'd be nice.
But before we do that,
My motion is only to change the
you
name
change, I
of the
understand what you're
application.
doing. It's not gonna change nothing what you're saying, but I'm just like, Tony, I'm not ready to give that for the future.
That we need to
We're not
reserve
looking
that.
for a city manager, by no means.
No, we
But
got
one day this city might need to,
We got a de facto manager right now.
so I'm ready to vote on it.
Okay, all right, then, we're going to vote on Commissioner Allen's motion to change the city administrator job title to city manager. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and so all opposed? Aye. And then that motion does not carry, it fails. We have Commissioner Allen and Commissioner Mathis opposed, and the Commissioner Millender and Walden and Mayor Paz in favor.
You got it right.
Wait.
Opposite.
Nay.
Nay, yes, and in favor for,
I saw it.
Nay would be the vote. Nay.
yeah. These two, yay, these three, nay.
You sound gay.
Okay, now look, we've got to do something.
Mayor.
Yes, sir. We've got to do something for these job descriptions.
I would recommend,
Okay, quiet now, please.
I would recommend, if you want to do it in a motion, that the 3 position descriptions has been submitted and there's been changes suggested for those to be sent back to the HR committee for review this coming week and then brought back to the board.
Okay, and I'll accept that motion by Mr. Millender, and then we'll go ahead. We need a second? Does anyone want to second that motion?
Second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Walden. Then I just wanted to say that will come back again before the board in January.
Probably. We'll meet this coming week, Wednesday.
Okay, and then I would like to see I did include the entry of public records request, but also who might be property manager or assign those duties, or at least so that we know who to look to for property manager. We have someone performing those duties now, and essential versus non-essential personnel. So on that motion, is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And then may I have, that's the end of our business, and may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll so move.
Okay. Okay, that was a motion by Commissioner Millender, second by Commissioner Walden. Is there any discussion?
Aye.
All in favor? That motion